Our next topic deals with the diversity of neurons. So of course you have 100 billion neurons in your brain and a lot more outside of your brain. So neurons that I just showed you are the generic ones, but they come in a different varieties. So here, for instance, you see a cell body and an axon. Here's a cell body and one axon going out, lots of dendrites. Here you see a cell body and lots of axons, and so on. So we try and organize the neurons or try to make them into different classes because they are so diverse. There's two main ways we classify neurons. One is by structure, the other one is by function. So by structure, we classify according to the number of processes, and that processes are the axons and the dendrites. So for example, we've got three different types of neurons here. The first one we say is multipolar. So think about what multi means. Many. And then polar means different ends. So here you can see that there's many dendrites around the cell body and then one axon. So because there's many dendrites and the axon, it's multi. This one over here has one main dendrite coming in. I know these look like little dendrites here, but they're actually little receptors that feed into the main dendrite. And this one dendrite goes to the cell body. And then there's one axon going out. So we call this one bipolar. Bi for two. The two is one dendrite plus one axon. And then the last one here is unipolar. This one's kind of weird. Here's the cell body, and you notice, you look at the cell body, there's no dendrites around the cell body. Instead, there's actually one long axon going through with the cell body off to the side. And these are little receptive endings, little receptive centers. So this one we say is unipolar, uni for one, and in this case, only one axon. By far, multipolar is going to be the most common of the neurons that we'll see. Another way to classify is by function. So basically, where did the input come from or where did the output going? So for example, we can have sensory neurons. Sensory neuron's job is to receive sensory input. So for example, here we have sensory neurons on the hand sensing touch. For instance, the feeling of touch of the sand on the hand. You also have sensory neurons in your eyes, and their job is to receive the sensation of light. You have sensory neurons in your ear to receive the sensation of sound, and so on. Next, we have motor neurons. So we've actually seen motor neurons before when we talked about our muscles. So motor neurons' job is to go and innervate muscles for movement. So you have motor neurons that go and innervate your biceps. You have motor neurons that go and innervate or activate your quadriceps, and so on. So the motor neurons contact muscles and get the muscles to move. Then all the other neurons are interneurons. Interneurons tend to be found in the central nervous system. Interneurons are the in-between neurons. Inter means in between. So they're the ones between the sensory and the motor neuron. For example, the interneurons will take in the sensory information from the sensory neuron and then communicate that to a motor neuron. So we think of the interneurons as doing like the thinking, the processing. All right, so now we're going to go back to our nervous system divisions, right? Remember we talked about this little scenario where we see the glass of water, we think about what we want to do about it, and then we can move to pick it up. And we talked about how the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system is involved in this scenario. So remember, the first step was sensory input. Now we know that that sensory input is done by the sensory neuron, right? So in this case, again, the sensory neuron's in the eye, receiving the light from the water. And that sensory neuron sends the information towards the brain, which is in the central nervous system. And we use the word afferent. Afferent means to go towards. So once the information gets to the brain, the interneurons are the second step. They're the ones that are doing the integration or the thinking. Right? So they take in the information from the sensory neuron, and then they'll send it to the third step, which is the motor neurons. Remember, the third step is the motor output, and the motor neurons are in charge of making those muscles move and give you that motor response you want. Now the word efferent means to go away from. So in this case, efferent means we're going away from the central nervous system. You can think of it as exiting. Right? So here we're exiting the central nervous system. So now we have this whole scenario. We've got the sensory input done by the sensory neuron. That's in the peripheral nervous system. Sends the information towards the interneurons in the brain, that's in the central nervous system, and then the information is sent out to the motor neurons, which is back in the peripheral nervous system, and that's your motor response. So here's a true or false question for you. When you burn your finger on a hot pot, you first activate sensory neurons. All right, so this is true, right? The very first thing is when you touch that hot pot, a sensory neuron is going to sense that hot temperature. So that's the first step. And then you can think about the whole scenario and go through the second and third step, right? The second step would be thinking about, hey, this pot is hot, I'm touching it, what do I want to do about it? I should probably move my hand, right? And of course, you hope that interneuron in the brain works really fast, because then your third step, of course, in this situation would be to use the motor neurons to go ahead and withdraw the hand and arm from the hot object. All right, so we've just gone through the different ways you can classify neurons.